Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Metkler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am the host who doesn't like toast, Brian E. Roach, the host who knows that the refs stink, and yes, you're going to hear me say it a lot. I will try not to dwell on it, but damn, they stink. And as I mentioned on Twitter, the cloud of profanity that sits currently over the top of my house may never dissipate. That is how annoyed I was towards the end of this game, as I'm sure most of Steelers Nation was as well. I know that my compatriot, my brother from another mother, Joe Kuzma, is unavailable right now. He has been enjoying some adult beverages at a bar, watching the game with a bunch of other Steelers fans somewhere, and is not ready to be on the show today, not available. So our younger brother from another mother is here. He's awake. He's had his nappy, and he's good to go. So let's welcome Zach Metkler, the professor of football, back to the show. Zach, how you doing, man?
Not too bad. I feel refreshed. Feels like I've been sleeping for the last week, so it's definitely good to be awake and amongst the living for this win today.
Absolutely. Amongst the living is how the Steelers find themselves right now after a game that, you know, it's 43 degrees in New Jersey today, and I'm drenched in sweat from the pacing. I may have walked 3 miles during the course of this game. This is a game the Steelers come away as winners. Let's start off by saying that they found. I don't even want to say they found a way to pull it off, but they did pull it off, 26-24, thanks to Adam Vinatieri being older than me and missing the last-minute field goal, preserving a Steelers victory. Look, there's a lot to unpack in this game. A lot of questions to be raised, and I got to get this out of the way first. What the hell is? Do they think that whoever the guy that was going to catch that ball is 19 feet tall? If in case you weren't watching the game, what we're referring to here is late in the fourth quarter, the Steelers are holding the Colts deep in their own end zone. The Colts are trying to drive to get a field goal to take the lead. And the refs call a pass interference penalty against, I think, Steven Nelson, because he bumped a guy down the field who had pulled up and stopped a little bit. But the ball lands 20 yards down the field. So there's no question that this was an uncatchable ball. He'd had to be Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, or Stretch Armstrong, or somebody, you know, who could make his arms stretch out yards and yards away from him to catch that ball. It wasn't going to happen. The refs, of course, make the call, and not surprisingly, honestly, even though I am stunned by it, the call is upheld in review. The announcers are incredulous. Everyone in the entire universe watching that is incredulous that this is pass interference. I believe you tweeted out, but for the days when an uncatchable pass always meant that it was not pass interference. But yet here we are. What universe do we live in where that is an acceptable call by a referee?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, I'm watching that. Some of these PIs are, you know, they can be a questionable decision. You know, I can kind of see where the ref's coming at. But that ball landed a good 8-9 yards past the receiver. It wasn't even like he had to decelerate, and that's why it was overthrown. I mean, Brian Hoyer had massive pressure from Cam Hayward and company on that throw, had to step up, and he just launches it. And there was no way, even if Steven Nelson was nowhere in the zip code of covering the receiver, he was never going to make that catch. And to have it be challenged, even Gene Steratore coming and saying that in his day, you know, it would have been a no call. It kind of blows my mind that they still felt the need to uphold that penalty. I didn't see any way that they were going to have that. I thought that was going to be almost a surefire pass interference win on the challenge for the first time in what feels all season for the NFL. But I think they blew that call pretty sizably, and I really don't know what they were looking at. I think even if it was catchable, I think it was still a soft pass interference to begin with because, Steven Nelson was working the body a little bit, but I don't think it was anything too egregious. That it was an awful call that could have had massive ramifications in the game had it not gone in the Steelers' favor in the end. But it was another feather in the cap of bad calls this year in the NFL for sure.
Yeah, I just look. I as I said, and people are criticizing Tomlin for challenging that call and then the following one, which was also could have easily been offensive pass interference, but you knew that one wasn't going to get overturned, even though you could see that it potentially was there. Yeah. But you have to challenge this first one. I kind of agree. I think the second challenge was silly. But maybe you're hoping that the refs do that infamous makeup call where they finally realize some sanity comes in their head and they go, oh my gosh, we really screwed them on that call. Let's make a makeup call to give them a little justice back. But they didn't even do that. But I have no problem with Tomlin challenging the first call. He absolutely should have challenged it, even though there's probably no chance that it gets overturned, simply because apparently it happened so quickly, by the way. This is why I don't even think they look at pass interference reviews anymore. If it gets challenged, they just go, nope, stands. We don't care. Don't care what it was. We're not looking at it because we don't know what pass interference is anyway. So we're not going to make any judgments, and we're just going to let the refs call it. It was that fast with that call, and that was so blatantly bad. Yep. This reminds me of one of those times where the refs come out on Monday and go, we're sorry, we made a mistake. Do you have any problem with Tomlin challenging the first one?
The first one, not at all. I'm sitting there, I'm like, he better challenge this because I thought it was a bad call. The second I saw the ref reach for his pocket and wind up, I had no problem at all with Tomlin challenging that, and I think that one was kind of a slap in the face to him. Second one, I'm with you. I was kind of surprised he threw the flag other than just formality and hoping to get a makeup call, but I thought that one was pretty straightforward. I didn't really see a clear push-off from the receiver that would indicate that it was going to be OPI. But you never know. Sometimes the ref, like you said, they realized they made a massive mistake the first time around, or I should say the first time and the chance they had to correct it. And they might throw them a bone, but I'm not really surprised that one went in favor of what the call was. So yeah. I had no problem with the first one at all.
Yeah, there's a lot to question with coaching in this game. I think let's just start by saying there was a tendency to be ultra conservative, and it's interesting because at the end of the game, the announcers and Dan Fouts and is it Ian Eagle are the two announcers, and Dan Fouts is terrible, but he's at least no Chris Collingsworth. But I think they even mentioned, hey, if the Broncos last week had just been able to get a first down, but they went ultra conservative, which caused Joe Flacco to go off on a rant at the end of in their press conference, they could have won that game. And what do the Steelers come out and do when the game is on the line? Run, up the middle and pass, and of course they end up having to kick. And luckily for them, Jordan Berry, comes up with a great kick and pins them down, the 15, 14, 16, something like that. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot to question because other than one drive where they went long to Mason to James Washington, the one ball that got them really deep, then the ball to Deontay Johnson that got the pass interference call on them, which, by the way, I also thought was weak. Yeah. And again, proves that the refs stink because that probably wasn't pass interference. But I'll take it, in that instance, obviously. What's going on? I mean, is it really so much that they're handcuffing Mason Rudolph, or is it more the problem that he's not and it's hard for us to tell this on TV. We have to wait until the All 22 comes out and things like that if we want to review it. But is it, he seems to hold the ball longer than he should, especially, on the safety call where he gets, strip sacked in the end zone. Luckily, Villanueva falls on the ball, so it's only a 2-point issue, or that would have flipped the game. But he's holding on to the ball. Is it that nobody's really open, or is he just afraid to push the ball into tight windows? And if that's the case, man, he's got to get over that, because they're all tight windows in the NFL.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. I know the first interception they had in the game, kind of going on the whole tight window thing, I don't know if that kind of spooked him a little bit, but, he threw that into a very tight window, into what looked like it was about triple or quadruple coverage, into where Juju was settling into the zone. I had no problem with the throw, because I thought he put the ball kind of where it needed. It could have been a little bit better, a little lower, but, Juju has to make that catch before it gets off. I think that was kind of a huge point from them, because you kind of start seeing a stall with the offense from trying to push the ball downfield. And if that's the case, you can't just abandon that trust, especially because he's had moments under center and from the shotgun this year where he's throwing the ball down, but down the field with relative success, and I think you have to take some of those shots. At some point, you have to stop just being content with chucking the ball down to Jalen Samuels, which props to him for having the day he had, but it makes your offense so one-dimensional. And I don't know if it's a lack of confidence in Mason Rudolph. I don't know if it's a lack of not being able to really see the field as well. I mean, I know the announcers made a couple references to how Ben senses these things, but you can't compare Mason Rudolph to a future Hall of Fame quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger, who's been doing this for as long as he's been doing it and knows the offense in and out. And I think a lot of it has to do with his internal clock. You can tell there's still times where it's not where it needs to be. I think that safety was a very big part of just internal timing. If it's not there, you're in the end zone, and you feel the pressure, you got to just find a way to throw it away. You can't afford to take a sack there. That could have easily have gone in the other direction if he doesn't fall back on it and turns into a touchdown instead of a safety. But I think it's a blending of factors. I don't think it's a cut and dry lack of confidence in him or just him not being fully ready for the moment. I think game flow has dictated a lot of what's gone on with him. And I'd like to see more of these shots. Last week he led the NFL in air yardage, I think, on per target. I forget what the exact stat was. But I think his average throw went 13.3 yards down the field last week, and it was the top in the league. And you have to be able to take those types of shots. And I think looking at the field, the throws downfield, the receivers are there. I mean, it's not like they're not open every single time, but the balls are either not on target or he's just not getting them out there quick enough, because the window of opportunity in the NFL is so small. If you don't get the ball out a lot of the times right when it's there, you have to lead them open or get them to that point. If you miss that, DBs recover, linebackers recover, safeties recover. I think it's a large conglomerate of things going on right now. I'm hoping at some point in time that it kind of fixes up, because I know with the Rams game coming up, and a couple of these defenses that the Steelers will be seeing in coming weeks, you can't continue to play this conservatively. You're going to have to take some shots and test the defenses to say that I'm going to be willing to throw this ball down the field. I'm not going to be content just dinking and dunking with my running backs and tight ends for 2-3 yard gains and hoping for the best at that point.
Yeah, I tweeted this out towards the end of the game. And this is what's concerning me. And I said this at the end of the last podcast, is that the offense still is very concerning to me, and it remains so. 1 of 3 in the red zone, or 1 of 4 actually in the red zone, 1 of 3 when you were goal to go. Those kind of stats generally lose you a game, because in the NFL, when you've got first and goal, you need to convert those into touchdowns and not field goals consistently. Give credit to the defense when they got short fields a couple times. They at least held them to field goals once. But I think the on the flip side of this was that when the Colts were in the red zone, they were 3 of 4. So you see that flip, that conversion, and you kind of do wonder how we managed to win this game. But they did, and that's fantastic. I'm concerned that this offense is stale, that it doesn't have any real teeth, that they don't do any one thing well. And they need to find, it's like they're still searching for their identity in some way. The dump off passes at some point in the second half, the Colts figured it out and were like, yeah, go ahead and do it all you want. We're not going to let you get away with it anymore. Clearly you're afraid to go down the field, and we're not going to worry so much about that. We're going to worry about these undercut, and the linebackers were just playing them. What do they got to do to find a way out of this doldrum of offense that they find themselves in?
I think it still stems from the fact, and I know we've had this conversation in prior weeks, they just don't have an identity. Are they a run team? Are they going to trust Mason Rudolph to throw the ball? You see games like a couple weeks ago and even last week where James Conner has 145 rushing yards, and you're like, well, this is going to be it. They're going to pound the ball down their throat. And I know when you don't have James Conner, because him and Jalen Samuels are two different types of backs, that becomes difficult to try to establish that type of identity. But if you're going to continue to show this lack of confidence in Mason Rudolph, or just him have a lack of confidence in himself for whatever reason, you have to identify who you are. Either that's going to be a quick passing team, that's going to be a run team, run first team, that's going to be a air it out team. And obviously, when you had Big Ben under center, you're going to be a vertical push the ball down the field type of offense. And you can't be that way with Mason Rudolph right now because it doesn't have the same type of arm and feel yet that Ben has developed over the course of his long career. But I think until they get to that point, and they may never get to that point, this offense is going to continue to feel stale and stagnant and disappoint in a lot of facets of games where you're feeling like, well, they're on the goal line, they should score. They're in the red zone, they should be able to punch it in here. They should be able to convert on third down. And I don't know what it's going to take to get to that point, but they just haven't done it yet. And the longer the season goes along and teams start settling into who they are, which is what you kind of hope to see as you get to that midpoint of the season, the Steelers are going to start falling behind in games against teams that they probably shouldn't be falling against, because even if a team's bad and they have an identity, that's huge for them when it comes to game planning. The one plus to that is it doesn't allow opposing teams to kind of figure out what the Steelers' MO is yet, because they don't know what it is themselves. So I think you're going to see games like this where it's going to go back and forth, where you're kind of left scratching your head saying, what are the Steelers doing? Why aren't they doing these things they've done in the past with effectiveness? And I'm hoping that they don't wait too long to get to that point, because the more it goes on, the more unsettling it's going to be.
Yeah. The second part of my concern here is, and this may be one of those times where I have to comment later after taking a look at the All-22, but you've got two rookie cornerbacks, a guy named Tell the third and Rocky Sin, and Moore the second. Well, we have multiple,
young DBs
here. And yet, other than one play where I could clearly see that Deontay Johnson was wide open for a touchdown and Mason never saw him, you just don't feel like the receivers are finding a way to get open. Now, is that a function of they just don't have the experience yet, which I think is a good chance, although Juju now in his third season really ought to be more suave, I guess, with trying to figure out and take advantage of guys who are less experienced than him. Or is it that Mason's just, like I said, hesitant to throw the ball into a tight window, or maybe got snake bit after Juju? Because I'll tell you, I think that first interception, the interception that he did throw, only one, was more on Juju than is Mason, because the ball goes off his hands and he's got to pull that ball in. But is that of a concern to you? Because it is to me that they just, even against guys who are not necessarily top tier talents, and you kind of thought with Pierre Desir going out, not being able to participate in this game, that maybe they could make some hay. Just didn't seem to turn out that way.
I think James Washington is the one reason why today I think you can kind of make the argument that he just needs to give it a shot, because James Washington had some of the most difficult types of catches you're going to see. The one-handed grab that was clearly behind him on a bad throw from Rudolph, he found a way to drag it in there. He had that one where he bobbled it and still managed to come down. In both plays, he was very heavily blanketed, but Rudolph still gunned it in there. And at some point, you have to take a shot, because you have no idea. These receivers are all high-caliber NFL receivers. They're there for a reason. And we've seen all the Steelers receivers make plays at some point in time between Washington, Deontay Johnson, and Juju. At some point, you have to trust them to try and make a play. And I think the opportunities were there. I know there was that one deep throw to Juju where it just went through his hands after Rudolph threw the ball into the field behind the DB. Yeah. That was a great throw. I thought a great opportunity for Juju to make a big catch. He just came up short. But you can't wait for these guys to be open, because when you're in high school and when you're in college, receivers get open all the time because just the game flow is so different. In the NFL, very rarely, unless there's a coverage breakdown, do you just see receivers have 3, 4, and 5 yards of separation? The average window is in the ballpark of 1 or less yard. So you have to feel comfortable at some point in time to try to throw that into the window and give yourself an opportunity to make a play, because if you can't wait for it to be open. I think that was the case with Juju's touchdown last week against the Dolphins, where he wasn't open, but Rudolph still threw it up to him, and Juju made that acrobatic catch over the defensive back. But I don't know if it's the fact that he doesn't trust what he's seeing. I know the pass protection hasn't been as great as we've seen in years past. It hasn't been bad, but it certainly hasn't been tremendous. And he's still trying to feel things out, and I'm hoping he starts taking some risks. I'm not saying making stupid throws, but you can make risky throws, whether it's going to be into a tight window or to a receiver that's covered. But you have to trust these guys to do what they can do and try to make the catch. I'd rather see you throw the ball down the field to a receiver who's being covered and he just misses the ball, or the defensive back makes a really nice pass breakup, than just not taking that chance at all, because there's crazy catches all the time. Give them an opportunity to make a play and give themselves a chance to be on NFL Network tomorrow morning for some of the top catches of the weekend. But until that happens, it's going to be the same old, same old.
Yeah, and I mean, again, so from the offensive side of the ball, just to give you all the numbers, Trey Edmonds, who incorrectly was identified by the NFL Network as his brother, who, Terrell did not play running back. It was Trey. Had a decent game, 73 yards on 12 carries, 6.1 average, but one of those was 45, and he had some nice solid runs. I mean, so, you look at that. Jalen Samuels as a running back, 8 for 10 yards, 1.3 average, not much there. The new Brooks James, the new running back that they pulled in, 1 for nothing. So, they tried the one reverse with Deontay Johnson. He got 2 yards out of that and was lucky to get that. So, they didn't break 100 yards in rush yards. Mason Rudolph was 35 of 26, 191 yards, the 1 TD, the 1 interception, and a rating of 84.3. Jalen Samuels caught everything that was thrown to him, but even that, 13 catches for 73 yards. Vance McDonald was okay. He had a touchdown. James Washington, I thought, had, and we'll get to our grown-ass man, but I'm going to give James Washington just for the one-handed catch, even regardless of the first one where he bobbled it and managed to catch it. And as the announcer said, he didn't seem sure whether he caught it until the ref said it was good. He gets a grown-ass man for that. I mean, there may not be another grown-ass man on the offensive side of the ball today other than that. There just wasn't much there. And then you thank God for Minka at this point, because he had as much to do with this victory as anybody else. That 96-yard interception return for a touchdown certainly gets him a grown-ass man award. But you take that away, and it flummoxes me that this defense that had played so well through most of the season lets Brian Hoyer get a 105.9 rating and throw 3 touchdowns. I don't know where the knockoff was, and I'm going to ask you this because I asked Joe this the other day. Steven Nelson has been really good this season, and to the point where teams seem to be picking more on Joe Hayden than Steven Nelson. And I thought Joe Hayden had been playing a little soft earlier. Now, he made some nice he had a real nice pass breakup in this game, was attacking the receivers when they caught the ball, was decent in run support. So I thought he had a much better game, maybe the best game he's had this season. But where do you think the breakdown here is, and is it really just that they still can't cover tight ends?
I think a lot of it still they can't cover tight ends, and I know the one touchdown, I believe it was to Jack Doyle. You kind of saw Minkah Fitzpatrick, as great as he's been, he's kind of just standing there not covering the tight end going down the seam. Now, it very well could have been by design for whatever reason. I'm not going to criticize based on that due to the fact that we don't know the playbook. We don't know what the scheme is supposed to look like. But there was times where you're still seeing Devin Bush kind of get beat by these guys, and Minkah Fitzpatrick or Terrell Edmonds, kind of getting leaked in behind on some of these seam routes. And, when you have a guy like Devin Bush, no matter how athletically he is, if he gets beat even just by a little bit on some of these 6'5", 6'6" tight ends, or even if they're 6'4", that's going to be a disadvantage to you if you're not running that perfectly with them. And I still think that's kind of a big problem because I think the Steelers are getting enough pressure. They're definitely taking advantage of opportunities on the back end, and the corners we've seen, like you mentioned, Steven Nelson is having one of the most underrated seasons by a defensive back in the NFL this season, in my opinion. And Joe Hayden, who has been somewhat soft at times, is still, I think, playing effective football. And like you said, you saw him lay the wood a couple times, have some nice pass breakups. But I just think at some point in time, the Steelers need to stand up the tight ends and stop letting them be just sieves down the field and picking up this yardage on these seam routes, on quick outs, whatever. Because once they leak behind you, and the Steelers are running so much zone over the last couple weeks compared to what they did last season and to begin this year. These tight ends are just finding nice little cushions in the zone, and even if it's a quarterback like Brian Hoyer, it's an easy throw as long as you can see the tight end read in the middle of the field in the space between the zones. That's a quick dump off pass. It should be an easy completion, especially for a guy like Brian Hoyer who has been in the league for a while. He might not have a spectacular arm or be a great quarterback, but he is an NFL caliber quarterback who's stuck at 34 years old. That's a quick dump off pass to him, and I think that's still going to be the crux of the Steelers defense until they find a way. And I do think it'll come. I think Devin Bush has shown flashes against tight ends and against running backs out of the backfield, and I think so has Minka Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. And I think it's only a matter of time until it does fully click. But when you're running a zone defense, like I said, it's so tricky to kind of get that because that's all about timing. You can't just leave your zone responsibility because you see a tight end running down there because you don't know what's coming underneath on a crossing route or on a D route or really anything of that nature. So I'm hoping that can kind of get fixed at some point in time, but it's a nonstop, repetitive cycle we've seen with the Steelers over the last however many seasons, and I don't see it stopping really anytime soon.
Yeah, the Steelers continued their sack attack. Certainly T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree both deserve grown-ass men awards for this game, combining for, I think, 3.5 sacks. Bud had a great game with 2 sacks and was really good on run defense. I thought I continue to see him improving, and it does finally look like he's getting it, which is both good and bad. It's good for us. Bad because he probably won't be here next year because I don't know that they're going to be able to afford to pay him. I think you might have been the one that tweeted out that he's going to get paid, and he's going to get paid a lot.
Yeah, fans want to complain about how much money the Steelers are paying him, and I've continued to say this since the end of last season when or 2 years ago, they said they were going to exercise his 5th-year option. The money they're paying him is still a discounted rate for what you look at the going rate of edge defenders is in the league right now. And I think with the way he's playing, he's going to get premium dollar. I don't think he's going to come anywhere close to the Von Miller, Khalil Mack level money.
No.
But I think he's easily going to eclipse the ballpark of $13 to $15 million a year. And fans might be disgruntled with that, but he's still an athletic, strong edge rusher who's in the process of having his best season as a pro, both against the run and the pass. And he's playing very good football right now, and he's had glimpses of it his entire career here, just not consistently. And fans might not like it, but that's the way the NFL works. And I do believe he's going to get paid. And I thought there was very few circumstances that would allow him to stay in Pittsburgh because either one, he plays too well and the Steelers aren't going to be able to pay him. He plays poorly again, and the Steelers don't want to pay him to come back, or he plays average, and he still wants to go out and test the market. So I didn't really see there was going to be a way that he was going to stay in Pittsburgh after this season. But I'm happy that he's having the success he is currently because while he's in Pittsburgh, that only means good things for the Steelers right now as it stands in 2019. So I'm glad to see him kind of putting it all together finally after 5 years in the league.
Yep, and we're projecting a little ahead here. How much money is T.J. Watt going to make?
Oh, it's early. I know it's a lot, but I don't see a way he gets less than $17, $18 million a year. And it's just fans, again, aren't going to like that, but that is the going rate for premier pass rushers in the NFL. And you have a player like T.J. Watt who makes the impact plays he makes. You can't let that walk. And if you let that walk, someone else is going to pay him a really pretty penny to continue to do what he's done for the Steelers over the last couple seasons. And I don't know if the Steelers will be able to dish that dollar out, and I don't know if he'd be willing to take any level of a discount for how good he's been. But right now he's playing himself into that upper tier of pass rushers in the league for the interceptions he creates, the sacks he makes, the forced fumbles he gets. You can't pass that up. And when you have a guy like that off the edge after the Steelers whiffed on Jarvis Jones, Jason World's prematurely retired, and you have no idea what the future of Bud Dupree is. The second you get one of those edge rushers, you should want to latch on to him as long as you could possibly latch on to him. If that means dishing out the Brinks trucks to get him the money he wants, then you have to go for it.
Yep. Now, I wanted really badly to give Cam Hayward a grown-ass man award during this game because the battle that I picked out in the pregame was Cam Hayward versus Quentin Nelson. I thought this is a critical battle, and Cam Hayward handled Quentin Nelson quite well for the majority of this game. As we know, he kind of pancaked him onto Jacoby Brissett, which caused Jacoby Brissett's injury, and this is a grown-ass man thing. But the miss of the Brian Hoyer sack.
Oh, that was I had chest pains watching that take place.
I'm like,
is that Brian Hoyer or Lamar Jackson out there? I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean he's my OG grown-ass man, but and if minus that he would have had one. But man, I gotta hold back because that was a whiff on a 30-whatever-year-old journeyman quarterback. You got to make that sack. So hey, Cam's human. He makes he misses something every now and then. Maybe Hoyer was greased. I don't know. But so I've given you mine, right, Minka. And I'm proud of myself because I'm not going to mispronounce his name anymore after that 96-yard return. I feel that it would be dishonorable of me to do so. TJ and Bud, and then I guess, as I said, James Washington on the offense. You got anything different for that?
Yeah, I'm still going to go back to my OG guy since he came to the Steelers, Mike Hilton. He's quietly, again, having another effective season in my mind, and they've kind of shifted up roles between him and Cam Sutton with how effectively Cam Sutton's been playing in coverage, and Mike Hilton's kind of been the box run defender, clear running down type of defender at corner instead of the one where Cam Sutton is now dropping back into coverage almost exclusively. But you see that he had a crucial sack there in a pivotal moment there, especially after it could have been catastrophic whenever Steven Nelson goes down with his shoe coming off and then not stopping the clock for whatever reason for him to put it back on. He came off the field, and that could have been catastrophic, especially as Steelers fans are sitting there holding their collective breaths as Artie Burns takes the field. I wasn't, because I still have my confidence in my man Artie Burns, but I digress. But Mike Hilton came in with a classic come underneath, completely blow the pocket up sack that I thought was a pivotal moment that could have been very catastrophic had he not gotten there. And I just think he's consistently been under the radar with some of his run defending. For a guy of his stature, he still has no problem coming downhill, laying a boom whenever he has the opportunity to. And while he doesn't ring as true as someone like Minka Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, or even in this case today, James Washington, I still think he had moments filling lanes and getting underneath, making plays that went a little unnoticed because they weren't the big, flashy, pomp and circumstance type moment. But those small, effective things can help make a game go one way or the other. And I thought he rose to the occasion like he did to today and in recent weeks.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with Mike Hilton today. And you bring up the Steven Nelson shoe incident, which made me laugh because, he heaves his shoe into the Colts, backfield, so to speak, off to the side when they don't want to let him put it back on. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm Ryan Hoyer, I'm immediately throwing it to whoever Steven Nelson's covering because he can't get traction without a shoe.
Yeah.
So
that was my main thought, is watching him backpedal and with one cleat on, and if he slips and falls and Hoyer has a chance to dunk and throw that ball in there, then it's a home run shot because the fact that there's no one near him.
Yeah.
Luckily he didn't, and luckily the pressure rolled him out the other way, but it was still could have been very catastrophic.
Absolutely. I'm kind of on the edge of giving Chris Boswell a grown-ass man award for this. I mean, he did hit a 51-yard field goal. He was perfect again today. Certainly a large part of why they won, since the offense couldn't put points on the board for the most part, other than the one Vance McDonald touchdown. So a lot relied on the leg of Chris Boswell. And, people got asked, Tomlin got asked at his press conference, what's the difference between Boswell this year and Boswell last year? And he goes, that was bad Boswell last year. We don't have to worry about that because now he's being back to being the guy we expect, which he has been. Other than the 54-yarder he missed, he's had a perfect season. And I since that would have been a career high, I thought it was silly that they made him try it. But he's been solid. And I think that's very encouraging, because this is the kind of game they lose last year because he misses a field goal. Mm-hmm. And so Chris Boswell being back to the kind of guy that he's been, solid, consistent money, the Wizard of Boz is back, and that's a good thing. I do want to talk about one other player because I'm now so far off of his bandwagon or out of his hive, or I feel he is unlit. Whatever millennialism I don't know how to use properly. I tweeted this message out, which was, does Brian Switzer ever make anyone miss? And my question here is, when is this experiment over? And I get that he is at least consistent in catching the ball, and you don't worry about him muffing things. But man, watching him run kickoffs back and watching him try and return punts is starting to get brutal, because there's just doesn't feel like there's any chance that anything is going to happen. Is it time? I mean, I realize the Steelers cut Dante Moncrief this last week, and they probably needed to for multiple reasons. Even though it was unfortunate that it didn't work out there, and this is going to go down as probably one of their worst free agent signings ever. But when is it time? I get it when Ben was the starting quarterback and Ben, liked Ryan Switzer and you wanted to keep him around. But when is the time to try something else?
I'm hoping sooner rather than later. I mean, I haven't seen what his snap counts were today, but over the since week 2 against Seattle, whenever he had 13 snaps, and that was the game that Ben obviously got hurt. Since then, so week 3 on, he has a total of 10 offensive snaps, so he's contributing virtually nothing on offense. And special teams wise, I get, kind of as you mentioned, that his main shtick there is the fact that he doesn't typically muff kicks. So at least you're going to get a clean recovery and do that well. But if you're not contributing anything on offense, and then you're not going to be an electrifying kick returner, at what point do we not give someone else a shot here? I think the Steelers have other guys on the roster that can make some opportunities there. I know Deontay Johnson got plenty of opportunities during the preseason to return kicks, and I know he's not as polished of a guy back there as, say, Ryan Switzer is. But then you also just brought up a guy like Tony Brooks-James, who is a running back, so he's an offensive player and fits the mold of the type of guy that Mike Tomlin likes having back deep. I don't know how long he's going to be on the active roster, but he was an electrifying return man at Oregon in college, and I think he's worth giving a shot there. And, you have a guy on your roster at receiver, again, like Johnny Holton, who's a speed demon who could potentially turn the edge and get it going there. So I think there's guys that could potentially take that role. And, you don't necessarily have the security blanket returning kicks like they do with Ryan Switzer, but there's almost no chance of scoring, it feels like, at this point when he gets the ball in his hands. He's making nobody miss. He's kind of content just getting 3 yards and getting out of bounds or just fair catching it. And so there's really no threat to flip the field. You see with some of these other teams. I mean, I'm watching Paris Campbell or whoever else was returning kicks for the Colts, and I'm sitting there saying, well, he's going to bust this one, because he's taking a kickoff back 30 yards to the 40-yard line or what have you, So I think that element is making it harder for the offense, and that might be a root cause of some of the issues that Mason Rudolph's problems are, is the fact that their starting field position hasn't been that generous. And I don't know what point the experiment stops or they try to get something going with it. I'm getting tired of seeing it happen because it's just been the same old story every single day, and there's really no chance of any kick coming back, it feels like. And you have guys that can do the job and at least give them a shot and see if they're going to be more electrifying, that contribute on offense as well. So I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You notice certain aspects of things when you're watching these games, and I just realized at some certain point, yeah, I get it. He's going to catch it, but wherever he catches it is where it's going to be. And if he is forced, if I'm an opposing team, I'm high pointing a ball every time I kick off, because Ryan Switzer is going to make it to maybe the 20. Maybe the 22-yard line. He's not going to get any further. and so you're always going to benefit, as opposed to kicking it in the end zone where the Steelers get it at the 25. They're always going to start with slightly less good field position. And there's a good chance he may get tackled inside the 20. Because not only do I not think he makes anybody miss, but as soon as he's hit, he goes down. And I get it. He's a little guy. As an individual, as a person, I think he's a good guy. I like some of the stuff he's done around Pittsburgh. I like the way he interacts, but I don't know if that's a good enough reason to keep him on the team at this point. I think he got 40 yards in kickoff returns. He got no yards in punt returns because he got. I don't know how he convinced the refs that he had called a fair catch on that, and I don't know whether they were calling that as a helmet-to-helmet, whatever, on the one punt where he got the unnecessary roughness call that bailed them out and gave them an extra 15 yards on that, because that's another ref stink moment, because there was no penalty there as far as I could tell. Switzer didn't call for a fair catch. He didn't get a helmet-to-helmet hit, and yet we got an unnecessary roughness penalty, which just goes along with the roughing the passer that T.J. Watt got called for. That also stunk and was terrible. Joe had mentioned, I don't remember who the lead ref in this game is, who the umpire is, but he said, I don't have a problem with him yet. Well, I think you can say we do now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, going back to that return, my guess is the fact that it was helmet-to-helmet. I didn't see helmet-to-helmet contact. The replay they showed on TV, at least didn't think it was going to give you evidence one way or the other. And if Ryan Switzer was able to convince them of some level of I called a fair catch very subtly and you didn't see it or they didn't see it, then good for him, I guess. I'm not going to complain about calls going in favor of the team I cheer for, but at the same time, my biggest issue has just been a lack of consistency with the refs. And until they see some level of consistency, you're not going to have any problem. If you're going to be consistently bad, be consistently bad. I prefer you to be consistently good and make calls that are either right or just not call it at all. But it doesn't seem to be the world we're living in currently in the NFL. So
yeah, that's consistently consistency is my complaint. I don't, and it's more from the standpoint of so that everybody understands what you're seeing and how you're going to call it. Call it the same way all the time. Call it the same way on both sides of the ball. And again, if you're going to consistently just be wrong, fine, be consistently wrong all the time, so that people know, okay, even though this really isn't a penalty, you're going to call it. Because I feel bad for the guys. They just simply don't know what to do out there when some things are penalties that are so absurd, like T.J. Watt chest-butted the quarterback, and that's a penalty, especially considering he's blocked into him to a certain extent. I don't know how to handle it. The refs stink. They always stink. They've stunk all the time. It's just more obvious now.
That's the right thing.
So, taking a moment to look ahead, it feels like there's been a lot of complaining going on for a game that we won. But again, I just want to. I'm glad it's an ugly win. It wasn't pretty in any way, shape, or form, but we got it. It was a lucky win. We got it. They're 4-4. So they're back to 500, and we're thankful for that. I will take an ugly win over a loss any day, obviously. Yep. So I don't think that for as much complaining as we may have done about this game and the performance on the field by the victors, don't think that we don't enjoy the fact that we won. But looking ahead, we got the Rams coming up. Now the Rams have been an all over the place team as well. They let the Bucs drop 50 on them, and at the same time they've beaten some halfway decent teams and put up some good numbers. I don't remember their full record, and I haven't looked. But anytime Aaron Donald's coming to town, you got to be slightly concerned. when you look ahead to this game, I'll tell you, the last 2 games, the Steelers have started off with an interception in their first series. They can't do that. This is a game that I still think is winnable for them, but, man, they got to play better.
Oh, 100%. I mean, right now, looking at it, the Rams are going to be playing for a lot because currently they're third place. It's crazy. They're 5-3 and in third place in the NFC West. And they got a lot of stuff that they're trying to claw back into because no one expected the 49ers to be undefeated at this point. The Seahawks are playing very good football at the moment. But like you said, they can't come out slow. I mean, for whatever reason, under Mason Rudolph, they've been a very slow starting team and have kind of gotten their rhythm as the game's gone along. But when you have a defense that has Aaron Donald on it, Dante Fowler on it, newly added Jalen Ramsey on it, you have a bunch of guys on the back end of that defense that can make your life a living hell if you give them the opportunity to. You've got to come in, you've got to make plays early, and you've got to have a solid game plan in place. And right now, again, going back to me saying this team doesn't really have an identity yet, if you go into this Rams team without an identity on either side of the ball, but primarily on offense, you're going to struggle early on, and the Rams are going to be advantageous and try to get you off your game early and try to turn the ball over, get a short field for their offense, which has been up and down this year, like you said. They can't come out slowly. And, whether the interception was Mason Rudolph's fault, whether it was Juju's fault, at the end of the day, it was still an interception that got rammed back about 25 yards or so, if I remember correctly, after it happened. And it was the same story before against a very bad Dolphins team. So if the Steelers have any hope of winning this game, they have to go and they have to strike early and they have to play mistake-free football against what's still a very good Rams defense. And if they do that, they have a chance. But if they turn the ball over at will, if they fumble in bad moments, the Rams will take advantage of that. And I don't think they'll like the outcome of this game.
Yeah, I'm going to take back what I just said because I finally got to pull up the Rams schedule. The Rams haven't beaten a winning team either.
No.
So they beat the Panthers. Maybe the Panthers. The Panthers might have a winning record at this point. So that was the first game of the year. They beat the Panthers 30-27. Lose to the Saints. They beat the Browns. They lose to the Bucks. They lose to the Seahawks. They lose to the 49ers. They beat the Falcons, who stink. And they managed to put up a whopping 24 points on the 0-8 Bengals. I guess it's not nearly as intimidating a challenge as it could be. Jared Goff, whatever his name is, he's been a turnover machine this season. That plays into what has certainly become a strength of this Steelers defense, which is causing turnovers. It certainly isn't out of the question that they can steal this game, considering that it's in Pittsburgh. And wouldn't it be amazing to have the Steelers be 5-4 at that point in the season, especially if the Patriots can beat the Ravens this afternoon or evening, whatever time that game starts, and put the Steelers in a point where they're nearly in first place again. I mean, they're solid second place right now, and after that Rams game coming up, we've got what? The Browns, the Bengals, and the Browns.
Yep, three very big games that if they take care of their business will be a completely different record moving forward.
Yeah. You're looking at a team that has the opportunity to really turn their season around, but they've got to play a little more consistent. They've got to stop being slow. Another Tomlinism from his press conference was someone asked him, "What do you got to do to get Mason Rudolph to start quicker?" And he said, "Mason has to get Mason to start quicker." And so I guess it's the easiest thing, I guess, unless you have some parting thoughts, is to leave this by saying, they aren't where they want to be, to quote Mike Tomlin, but we'll take it because. Man, to be 4-4 after an 0-3 start with a plethora of backup players in your game, you have to give some credit to the coaching and to the staff for finding ways to win games.
Oh, 100%. I think just to add on to that, winning 3 games in a row is never an easy task for any team, except for obviously the Patriots who are undefeated. And the 49ers were undefeated, but winning back-to-back games, especially like you said, for a slow start like that, takes a lot of resiliency. No matter how ugly or how beautiful the wins are, wins or win. At the end of the day, that's the stat that ultimately matters when it comes down to the final season standings. So kudos to them, no matter how ugly it was. And you can make the argument, I already did on Twitter, that they didn't necessarily deserve to win this game, but they still found a way to pull it out. And I'm, for that, I'm thrilled as a Steelers fan. I can't really complain.
Exactly. So, Zach, thank you for staying awake and joining me on the post game here. We appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to share in the professor's knowledge. Anything you'd like to leave everybody with today?
Nope. I think you pretty much summed it up pretty well for me, Brian.
Excellent. So for everybody out there, that's it for us this time around. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment on whatever platform you're using to listen to us. We love the feedback, both negative and positive. You can call me out when I say stupid things. I don't mind. Somebody beat me up for saying the Colts hadn't beat anybody good when they clearly had, and I knew it too. So, whatever you have to say, just keep it as clean as possible. We appreciate that because we try to be family-oriented. And luckily, I got through this podcast without my cloud of vulgarities descending upon the microphone and forcing everyone to listen to it. So until next time, that'll close it out for us. And as I like to say, it's chaos out there, so be kind.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.